Hi, I'm Mayor Wayne Smith, and welcome to Inside Irvington. I'm here with We Care Media's great host and executive producer Herb Glenn, our fire chief and director Gary Shumlick, and from FEMA, we have two representatives from FEMA, one who handles a lot of their public affairs work, Alberto Pilat.
Correct.
And Louise Porter, who actually represents the SBA and will tell us a little bit about what the SBA has, and it's not just for business.
That's
it's
correct.
for residents and so forth. So welcome to Inside Irvington. The aftermath of Hurricane Sandy still has us spiraling in many regards. Issues like how do we fix sidewalks, and those things are burning issues in the township of Irvington. Nevertheless, we are recovering nicely. After much duress during that storm, and to those who don't know, the mayor was out for 8 days like everybody else, struggled through that with everyone else. Don't want people to think I had any better time than they did, because that was not true. And so Chief Shumlick is also, and I serve in the role of emergency management coordinator for the township as mayor, and Chief Shumlick is one of my deputies. So we'll start with Chief Shumlick. What were your observations about the storm and how we fared in it, Chief?
Well, the initial problems we encountered, or incidents, were trees down, wires down, trees into houses. We actually had a fire started by a tree falling into the wires and into the house. So it was more of electrical hazards, electrocution hazards, and to public safety. Fire and police were out trying to isolate these hazards and then try to contain them.
And Herb, I know one of our challenges during that period, because it was just, at some point I had some power to communicate. I think my communication vehicle stayed maybe a day, and then the next day I was out. So we were able to communicate on email and Facebook, but it was just a challenge communicating at that time. What were some of your experiences? I know you were all over the place between Irvington and Newark. Why don't you share a little bit about, as kind of a media person, what you saw and observed?
I thought that it was a very outstanding attitude between government and individuals that had the passion to want to volunteer to coordinate efforts to help, especially our elderly and people who are disabled. Some of the things that were very critical in the situation was, how do we get the kind of source that was necessary to power up cell phones and things that were absolutely necessary to communicate with? Communication was terribly at a disadvantage. And certainly we were very happy to find that there were people like yourself, Mayor, and first responders that were on the ground, going to houses, knocking on doors, and wanting to identify to the critical needs of individuals that had those kinds of problems that needed to be addressed. So we are continuing to look at ways in which we can find opportunities to educate people on preparedness, because it wasn't something that was unexpected. We knew it was going to happen. We just didn't have the idea that it would be that catastrophic. And what we need to begin to do now is work on how to be resilient in the matter, because it's not going to stop it.
Sure. And better prepared. So now the million-dollar question for the federal government is, what is FEMA doing? And we've had a great collaboration. Let me start out with saying that with FEMA. We just had a town hall meeting, I guess a week or so ago, and that they heard a mouthful from the residents, and particularly on that sidewalk issue. But want to say thank you for your help, and I guess there are two main programs that we're going to get Alberto to talk to us about. For the taxpayer, and when we say taxpayer, all of us, whether you're a property owner in the township of Irvington or not, but on April 15th, everybody pays the piper. So the federal government has stepped in. So remember, when we clean up all this stuff, the local government is doing its share. FEMA provides some public assistance to our government, I guess up to about 75% of most of our costs to clean up. But the second part of it is, you as an individual have a right to apply for damages through the FEMA process, and Alberto will tell us the number, the email, and all of that. And lastly, he'll tell us about, because the window of opportunity to file for claims was supposed to be at the end of this month in December, but they've extended it a month, and he'll tell us about that. So Alberto, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to reach out to all the citizens in the community here in Irvington, and who who see us today. As our friends here are saying about the category, this was a category 1. If you want to, I came into this area. Think about New Orleans was category 3s and category 4s, which were more devastating. And we thank God it was a category 1. So if you can imagine a category 2 or 3, and look at all the devastation it did, imagine a category 2 or 1. One thing I want to speak about is FEMA itself. We're here. We're on the ground. We've been on the ground since prior to this disaster. One thing I want to say that post-Katrina, lessons learned, we always say that the response at FEMA got really criticized about the response in Katrina. And prior to that, we got to remember that FEMA is not the umbrella of disasters. The state is the major umbrella. The state controls how it all happens with the emergency managers, locals, and city officials. So we are really here on support of the state. The state says we need FEMA here because we need them. So post-Katrina, we learned there's a lot of lessons learned, and now what happens is that the president now can declare what's called an emergency declaration. What that does is enable funds. 2 or 3 days prior to a disaster, which is already imminent and it knows it's going to hit, it enables funds for people ready for overtime for public workers to get ready, shelters and ready. FEMA already has in place generators in different specific areas. It has all their workforce ready. They have a staging site looking at this hurricane to see how the devastation. Sometimes we get criticized if FEMA says FEMA was too slow responding. But we got to remember, once the hurricane hits, within the first 24 hours, that's when you know where the devastation was affected. So we can't have it in one specific area because what would happen if the hurricane went right over all that? It would destroy everything. So a lot of the times FEMA has its personnel, its commodities, is all the forces in place in specific areas within the state that they know is not going to get affected. So once within the first 24 hours of that disaster, once everybody identifies the most impacted areas, everything moves in. We're talking water, ice, MREs, personnel, search and rescue. That's when FEMA's forces start moving, working closely with all the state, county, and local officials. Once that's already determined, now we do what's called a pre-disaster assessments with the local officials to see what was impacted, the damage, the dollar values. We all assess those damages. Once they meet the threshold, then the president makes a declaration, what's called the Presidential Declaration for a Major Disaster. That enables funds for individual assistance programs, the public assistance programs that come in. Like we were saying, there were 2 programs. The individual assistance. What is individual assistance? It's a program that enables families to receive temporary assistance. Now, the word I say temporary is very critical because FEMA is just a temporary assistance program that's going to help you temporarily until you get back to your normal status. So it enables funds for temporary assistance. What are assistance? We're talking home repairs, temporary sheltering, rental assistance, and to repair or replace items that were essential items. Essential items are very important that I specify what they are because what do you need to continue living in a safe and sanitary environment? Okay, so a lot of those are the points that we want to make across here today, that FEMA is here on the ground. We are still here. We have a variety of personnel on the floor still going door to door, knocking on people's doors to see if they still need assistance. But we gotta remember one thing, a lot of families are shy, a lot of families don't understand the process of FEMA. We don't give out food stamps. That's one thing we encounter a lot. People did lose their food. There are programs that were available, the DSNAP, Disaster Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that was available through the state and local county offices, but that program has already been ended, and I know that a lot of people took advantage of it. So, but FEMA is here to assist on unmet needs, insurance unmet needs. The first part that we recommend, buddy, is to call your insurance companies if you did have some sort of damage. And also, the first part of the recovery is to register with FEMA. The 1-800-621-3362 is our registration line. If you haven't to this point, there's still time available. We just had an extension, like the mayor was saying, till January 30th of the following year, 2013. The Recovery Center is one of the best places anybody could go to because there are people one-on-one that can speak to you about your case. You can really register there. If you have any concerns, any letters that you receive in the mail, we really encourage you. We sometimes have found people in the streets that receive a letter from FEMA that says, we were denied, FEMA didn't help me. So what's the whole point? I said, but there's always help, there's always hope. FEMA doesn't deny anybody. Sometimes you get denied for very small reasons. Your insurance hasn't been determined. It's very important because FEMA does not duplicate the benefits that you receive. It could be something of a document, some kind of verification that they're missing. Or just plain insufficient damage, to be really honest, in disasters you gotta be fair, if you had minimal damage, there's maximal damage. If minimum damage, you could probably live without it, that's insufficient damage. So don't take it as FEMA hasn't denied you, it's just that sometimes there's a process that we have to go through.
And you do have the right to appeal.
That is correct. There's appeal process. Once you receive that letter of denial, you go to Recovery Center, the one's located on 555 Martin Luther Boulevard here in the city of Newark, and you can write a letter, and just stating the facts that why you're appealing, and you have to do that 15 days after you receive your letter of denial.
Okay.
So you have 15 days after that to do that appeal.
So after the 15 days, you can appeal, but
Well, it's on a case-by-case.
Case basis.
Right, so if you
But you
didn't.
should appeal in the first 15
Right,
days.
15 days if you need those funds available.
right, I got you.
Okay.
And,
so-
and the DRC, the Disaster Recovery Center, is Essex County wide. It's
Correct.
for any individual that lives within Essex County, they have access to that facility. And it's there during reasonable hours, because a number of individuals have had
I heard, what do
difficulty
you
trying to get
consider
assistance.
reasonable hours? Is it not?
Well, they're there from 9 to 7.
Oh, okay, good. So people who
So
work till
people
5
who work
can still
till
get-
5
Right, they're-
still have an opportunity.
Yeah.
There were some offers provided in relationship to recovery when it came down to individuals who were able to have some kind of paperwork that said that they spent X amount of money in order to get the DSNAP monies in regard to finding ways of getting some kind
And
of.
the DSNAP was a state program that assisted people with their food needs.
Well, it was that reason for the use of it.
Yeah.
But you couldn't go and get DSNAP if you were going because of loss of food.
Okay.
You could only use things such as buying generators or the kind of fuel that was needed to power it, or if there was appliances that had been broken. But there were a number of individuals that were going to the service and finding out that they couldn't get it because what they were coming there for were receipts saying that they went out and
They wanted
bought
reimbursement for their.
for their groceries.
Right, they had to have show some kind of expense during the disaster that they had to incur, hotel expenses, that had to stay in hotels. Restaurants, that had to pay to eat. So I think that's what the state determined, that's
Right.
what their
criteria was.
their criteria was. So, and I think a lot of people.
And we
got
ran a
discouraged.
center right here in Orange Park.
Yeah, and there
DSNAP
were a
was
number of
actually right
people
here.
that did participate. But again, as being part of public service and getting feedback from constituents in our community, a lot of the information that was given to us did not meet the real concerns of the majority of the people in our community. So what we were really wanting to focus on was, what is FEMA really doing? Because there were some opportunities where people really thought FEMA was going to be like a reimbursement opposed to an assistance. And in most cases, when people were going in and saying that they had to have repairs on their home, they were offered loans opposed to grant monies or something that they didn't feel they had to pay back. Can you share with us exactly what FEMA's role is in recovery and why most of it is not based upon a grant kind of a process?
Okay,
But just before you do that, I want to get this. So residents who have applications pending, or if you have questions about it, you have an additional month to go inquire about it at the Willing Heart Center at 555 Martin Luther King Boulevard in the city of Newark. That will close at the end of December.
most likely in December.
So you have about 9 days.
9 more days.
9 more days to get down there to that center and get person-to-person help while the center is open. Now, we're going to pray and lobby that they continue to keep the center open to the deadline, since the
Right.
deadline is extended another month. My request would be residents would continue to have that one-on-one help if the federal government so deems it. So we'll be talking to our federal representatives about maybe keeping that open, because I think that's critical for a number of issues, that people have a one-on-one. Once you have that 9-digit ID number, so
Right.
that's also an important point that you need to know about your claim, that you're given a 9-digit ID number. So let you go ahead and answer Herb's question.
Yeah, okay, like I said, the federal FEMA is an agency that works on a verified losses situation. We partner with SBA because SBA is the agency that's gonna help bring people back to a normal status. especially homeowners, in this case, that have major losses. FEMA is just, it's not an insurance company, we want to say, it's just a temporary assistance to get you on a temporary, back to normal situation.
Now, the grant does come to the government. Those are grant
Right.
funds that come directly to the government. So
Right, it comes,
all
it's
expenses-
taxpayers' money, it comes out, right.
Yeah, mhm.
The grant money, if you say, it's money that people receive, but it's based on two scenarios: immediate needs and other assistance needs. That's the two scenarios. Immediate needs are, the impacted, we need to either repair your home right away, you need somebody for repair, shelter you right away, get you somewhere until your insurance kicks in, your SBA comes in. Now, why SBA? I mean, I'll let my partner speak about the SBA, why it comes into disasters, but it's the agency that's gonna really help you for homeowners in a larger scale of recovery. A renter could continue moving on to rent and personal property, but the homeowners are the real ones that get really impacted here and have the majority of the loss. The federal government designed this loan program so at a low interest rate that she will talk about, so that people could try to get back to their normal status. I don't know, Louise, do you have?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that the SBA is one of the primary sources of funds for long-term rebuilding. And we don't want the name or the word business in our name to mislead people, because the U.S. Small Business Administration makes low interest rate loans for homeowners, renters, as well as businesses of all sizes. So when someone registers with FEMA, based on their answers, FEMA may refer them over to the U.S. Small Business Administration for their disaster damages, be it their real estate, their personal property, or their business losses. When they are referred over to the SBA, that means they get an application generated to them through the mail. When they get that, we want to highly encourage people to fill that out, especially for their home damage, their personal property, their real estate. If they are approved for a loan, then a loan becomes an option. They're not required to accept it. And they're not required to accept the whole amount. They might find through the process of rebuilding that they don't need the entire amount. For example, the first $14,000 is uncollateralized, meaning it's a signature loan, meaning you sign the note and the loan authorization and agreement, and that releases the funds. So once you're approved, there are some options. That's pretty much my point. People are not required to accept it, and they're not required to accept the entire amount if they find out that they don't need that. Also, as Alberto was mentioning before, there is, the government is unable to duplicate what they call benefits. So if someone has received insurance for some portion of their rebuilding, then the government would not be allowed to lend them money for the same damages. But sometimes insurance takes a while to come in. And sometimes people don't want to settle with their insurance early. Maybe they're disagreeing with what their insurance company is saying. They don't want to feel pressured to go ahead and make that settlement and sign that check, because then that's a done deal with their insurance. They want to fight that a little longer. With the U.S. Small Business Administration lending program, they do not need to wait until they have a settlement. In fact, we encourage people to put the application in as soon as possible and to not wait until they have that insurance settlement. What will happen is if they know what the amount of their insurance is going to be, then the loan officer can take that off the top, meaning they can reduce the amount of the loan right from the beginning. But if they don't know, what they'll do is they'll just put it what they call an assignment, and when the insurance comes in, it can just go to repay the loan. A lot of people ask me, well, what are the loan terms? Well, we have no idea at this point, because it's a case-by-case basis. And what I mean by that is, once someone puts the application in.
Oh, so it's not a low interest loan?
Oh, no, it's definitely a low interest rate loan.
Oh, okay.
The rate is as low as 1.688.
Okay, so that's why I assumed that it was a low interest loan.
Oh, absolutely. No, the interest rate is low. It's federally subsidized.
Mm-hmm.
But what I mean by the terms is that the first thing that happens is that you're assigned to a loss verifier.
Mm-hmm.
It's that loss verifier's responsibility to determine how much you could be eligible for.
Okay.
Right, based on the amount of your damages, because it's completely based on the amount of your damages and your uncompensated loss. Meaning if insurance is coming in again, then that'll go to take care of that. But sometimes there's a lot that's uncompensated. So first they need to make the determination how much you could be eligible for. Then you're assigned to a loan officer, and that loan officer makes a determination how much of a payment would be reasonable for an individual, for a family, because they need to make, repayment and credit is definitely considered, but it needs to be reasonable for that family to be able to repay.
So can I assume that if a person owns a home, but they have a bad credit score, then they may not be eligible for the program?
Then they may get declined, and I'll get to that in one
Okay,
second.
all right.
Because when they put in the application, the loan officer makes a determination how much of a payment they might be eligible for, then they determine the amount of years. Because they can extend this for as long as 30 years, but it's a non-traditional program. So it's not automatically based on a 30-year term. It could be anywhere between a couple months to up to 30 years. So it's based on the amount of the loan, the amount of the payment, and then the time is figured out after that. Now, getting back to your point on what happens if people have poor credit or don't have repayment ability. Well, what happens is that we still want them to put the application in, to not prejudge that themselves, because sometimes credit may be better than what you think it is. Or maybe, just you might not have repayment ability, but if you've been referred, we definitely encourage you to complete the application, because if you are declined, then you could be referred back to FEMA for additional assistance. And that's really important, because sometimes people don't realize that if they're declined from this program for their personal property, their real estate, that they could be referred back to FEMA for additional grant assistance.
So I got to
through
ask
the-
all these real-world examples. So what about a person doesn't have insurance, but their house was damaged during the storm? Do they qualify for anything?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They should still put an application in, because really what that means for the SBA program is that they're just not getting compensation.
Right.
So then all their losses would be
That wouldn't be a
uncompensated.
barrier. Now, what
Right.
about issues like people had property damage and they owe real estate taxes and those kinds of issues?
Well, if it's something they have a
real
payment
issues.
plan on, and it's something that they're paying on a monthly basis, then
You can work with them on
yeah, they can, because
possibly.
that could be part of what causes, because they have to look at what people are paying out on a monthly basis.
True.
So if that's part of what they have to pay out, or if there's an issue with that on their credit report, then that might become an issue too. But again, if they are declined, then they could be eligible for additional assistance back through FEMA. So it's really important for them to
So
put the
let's talk
application
about what
in.
that additional assistance would be. So they gotta, because in this economy, you have people in varied and sundry financial conditions. And so if they're in a really poor financial situation and their house got damaged as a result of Hurricane Sandy, what are the other options for them? Say they don't qualify for the loan.
Right, then you come back to FEMA for this called the other needs assistance. So remember I talked about, there's two parts of the disaster grant.
Right, and that's what we want to know, so that everybody knows the
Exactly.
full range
That's
of.
exactly what is
Right.
important, yes.
And this is that point, though, that sometimes people leave the SBA application sitting on their kitchen table and never fill it out. And so they never get to this point right here.
Because they
never
feel like they don't qualify, they never just find out what the next
Or they
step
say,
is.
we're not a business, and they're like, and they just throw it in the garbage, but it's for homeowners and renters as well. And this is the point right here where sometimes people miss out on this other needs assistance because they second guess themselves.
So go through the
or-
process, fill it
Yes.
out anyway.
Let me ask you just for this SBA issue, and I agree, there was a misnomer and confusion that it was a business loan kind of approach, and it wasn't really for individuals other than having a business priority. In relationship to the response about renters, most of the individuals who are renters found themselves at a disadvantage because a lot of their food had to be replaced. Is that one of the areas that may be possibly encountered?
No, again, people are eligible to put in any sort of request for reimbursement that they feel, but usually it's like their couches, their refrigerators.
Their personal property.
Tangible
Yeah,
products,
they're-
Products,
but
yeah.
nothing when it's dealing with food, because that's where the biggest problem was.
Yes,
in
yeah, that's,
regard to-
trust me, that's one thing I hear a lot, food, we lost food and food and food.
There were
And-
rumors going around that there was a $300
Oh, yeah.
voucher being given out.
Kind of
Just
urban
make the-
legend,
Just make
yeah.
the phone call,
Yeah.
and you'll get $300.
No,
and that turned to
doesn't
be,
have, didn't have a voucher.
Yeah.
But coming
Turned to be a-
back to the scenario, I always like to, when I speak about the difference between the SBA loan and FEMA grant, you gotta really explain it to it in a scenario
Right,
format so people can really understand it. Let's look at it as renters, because the majority of the families that probably live around here are renters. That are probably wondering, I don't want a loan, and we understand that. And most likely, they probably won't even qualify for a loan.
But do the application
But
anyway.
it's like when you apply for a social security card or a driver's license, you got to bring the photographs. You know, you got to bring something that's going to continue your process. Well, in the FEMA, the SBA program, grant program, that application is required as part of the process. So you apply with FEMA, you get immediate needs, which is these rental assistance or temporary housing. Okay, that's the money you get up front. And a lot of people get that letter with $2,000 and say, oh, this is all I'm going to get? And they don't continue reading. It's for rental assistance. Okay, that's what you're gonna do for the next 2 months, rental assistance. Now, let's follow the process. The next process is the SBA application form. You submit it, get denied, come back to FEMA, and that's where your grant money continues. Okay? The maximum grant money FEMA allows for any individual or family that could qualify up to is $31,900. That's the max grant. And to get a max grant, you gotta be destroyed. Basically, total destroyed. Renters, average 4,000, 5,000. Max for personal property and just a couple months worth of renters. The homeowners are the ones that probably get the most burden. Let's say homeowners.
So let me see if I understand that. So, thank God, I mean, our South Jersey residents certainly suffered a lot more than our part of the state. But so if their house got wiped out, no matter what the value, the maximum they might be eligible for was 31?
31 FEMA grant.
Wow.
That's the max.
You couldn't replace your house with that?
Okay, so here we go. Here's the scenario with the homeowner. We have a $250,000 homeowner. He had $150,000 worth of damage. Let's just take that as an example. The insurance payoff is going to stay. The insurance after everything they looked at, $80,000. That's your settlement.
Right.
So you have $70,000 still floating in the air. And the max you get from FEMA is what I said, it was 31.9.
Right.
So you still got 40,000.
Still got a gap there, yeah.
Here's the gap.
Or you can borrow, possibly borrow.
Possibly borrow.
Right, and so, I don't necessarily know that getting declined is always the best thing. I mean, sometimes that's the way it plays out for us, depending on our situations that we have as individuals, as citizens. But if somebody is declined, and then they find out that they really need the loan, there is a reconsideration process as well. So the thing about the federal government is that if they decline your application, they have to tell you why. And they give you 6 months in order to request a reconsideration if you determine that you need one, maybe determine you need that money, or you realize that you can overcome the decline reason. Like maybe there was a reason that your credit was an issue. Or maybe you get a better job and you're making more money. Who knows what it could be?
Circumstances change.
Yes, exactly. But they give you that opportunity to request a reconsideration. In fact, with the federal programs, you can always put a request in, no matter what it is that you'd like. Let's say you're approved for a loan and they are very specific on the use of proceeds. So you're going through, you've approved the loan, you've received some funds in it, and then you decide that you'd like a change in it. You don't want to use the money for all your personal property, perhaps. Let's say you want to change maybe a use of proceeds from a little less personal property to a little more in a different area or something like that. You can always put a request in and it will be considered, but it has to be in writing, no matter what your request is. If you want them to reconsider it, if you'd like them to change some terms, whatever it is, you have that right to make a request, but you have to put it in writing.
Like I said, even for renters, like I say, the majority of the residents in Irvington can be renters that are applied. And it's very discouraging to them that, they need help. We understand that. And they want their money right away, and what census are available, because, this is a grant program. But like I said, there's a process, and we're here to help them in any way possible, but they have to follow that process. And I know the word loan is probably the one that's throwing everybody off here, that's saying, why should I have to take a loan if there's grants? And I had substantial damage. But that's just the process. But nobody's saying that they're eligible for the loan. That's what we want to encourage everybody, that just
So
fill
first,
it out.
before the other assistance kicks in, they have to almost not be eligible for the loan.
Basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they get the immediate needs, the two parts, the non-income based and the income based. There's two
Right.
different things, right? So the immediate needs are going to be there. You were substantially damaged. You have a basement, was mold. You were living there. We got to get you out of there through the either transitional sheltering assistance program, rental assistance. That's the immediate need.
So even car damage, so like, say, for instance, as a result of the storm, your car was almost totaled because a tree fell on it. So which program would cover that?
Well, like I said, you'd have to go the same process. So the car would come under the other needs assistance.
Oh, needs
So it would have to come right after SBA. If you're denied it from SBA,
Okay.
you come back.
Okay,
to
so you go through that, even for the replacement of the car, you go
Yes.
for the SBA.
Because the
Right.
car would be considered personal
Personal property. Okay, all right, those are
That's
real-
why the disaster recovery centers are so important. It's like a one-stop base.
You can get all
with
the
all of the services there. And as we can recognize that there are some capacities that go beyond FEMA and SBA. What we want to get an idea of, because there was some other rumors that were going around saying that FEMA was hiring people to be able to do the cleanups. Now, we understand that there
Well,
is a process in
you know
regard to
what
that
it
as
was,
well.
yeah, and let me just clarify some of that. It wasn't you know what was happening, and we experienced it here too, Herb, you know, the whole scenario. Companies were out there trying to capitalize on the hysteria around cleanup and saying they were hiring. They actually tried to approach the local government, and we weren't in a position because we were trying to figure out, you know, how we get things done. Like we needed cranes and so forth, and we actually used our local government staff to do most. So we weren't out there hiring anybody. So, and then they would go out into the community, creating even more hysteria, telling property owners, oh no, we could get this off these trees off your house, but the city won't hire us because we weren't in a position to hire anybody. And we have public bidding laws we have to go through and all that. So that was part of a well-orchestrated scheme by some of these unscrupulous operators who were out there trying to get people to hire them to take the trees off their houses.
But we're learning that even in the capacity of individuals using other resources to get their properties cleaned, that could have been part of the request that they made to FEMA for reimbursement. Is that true?
Okay, first thing, FEMA doesn't hire.
No, it's not about whether FEMA was hiring anyone.
Okay.
If a person hired someone to clean their property, could they have brought that receipt and got reimbursed through FEMA for that purpose?
Okay, it all depends on the situation. Okay, when you remove debris from a home, and you within the FEMA grant program, it has to be a situation that either a tree is imminent danger to the home. Anything that's endangering the home, that you need to cut it or remove it, then that's what FEMA's going to look into. If it fell in your backyard and you have to pull it out,
Yeah, most of ours fell on people's homes. They were in
Right, but we're saying that there are scenarios.
There are scenarios.
Because, see, that was the question that came about. Even though we knew, after we learned that FEMA was not hiring anyone to come to do the cleanup, we realized that individuals were given an option to hire someone to clean up their property with an expectation of getting reimbursed for it.
It wasn't that they had an option. You know, and I always say this to every resident, no matter where they are, tenant, property owner, the first obligation for any restoration is not the government. It's what you can do to get your property back up to speed. However it is, if you got your own resources, whatever, and you want your property moving, whether it's through insurance or whether it's through private money. And there were some people who had the ability, they said, I'm gonna hire somebody, cut this tree off my property, pay him, and I'll deal with, or try to see if I'm eligible for any reimbursement or a loan or whatever the case may be. So, you know, it's sad, even in a national disaster, the first response most people have, as the government has to do anything, and the first real response is, what can I do to help my own situation? And then I turn to the government for assistance. But I think, we've got into this almost cultural mode that we think and I saw a property owner says, look, I get somebody I hire somebody, get this thing off my house, and I'm gonna get moving, I'll figure that out later. So I think that's where the misnomer. So people could have been eligible for reimbursement through a process, but they have to, if they spent their money out, they had to go through this process. And I think people weren't familiar with the process, and I think that was a whole education piece.
So that's why the recovery centers is such important.
Yes, okay.
We had families that got $2,000, and the first thing out went to buy a refrigerator, and it was for rental assistance because lack of knowledge. And I got $2,000. I need a refrigerator or a washing machine right now, and then they say that's all I'm going to get from FEMA. But in reality, that wasn't for that particular, because of the process. Mm-hmm. They got the rental insurance. They didn't continue eating. They haven't done their SBA until they go to the ONA or not, and they just disqualified them. They just stopped right there. Not they disqualified, they just stopped. And lack of knowledge going to the recovery center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's making me think. We talked a lot about homeowners and renters that have had damage to their real estate and their personal property. And since it is the U.S. Small Business Administration,
well, we got to talk about businesses.
I feel like
that was my next question. That was going to be my next question.
Excellent.
So if a business had a sign destroyed, knocked off their building, they would be eligible.
That would be, because that would be physical damage to their business property. If a business had damage to their inventory,
windows
if they lost,
blown out and that kind of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Even if their inventory was lost due to power being out. It's a different sort of scenario because it's business
So
inventory.
a supermarket who may have had its freezers and lost all of its food and all
Yes.
of that, they were eligible for.
Yep, that would be for business contents.
Okay.
And for inventory. But yes, definitely businesses are eligible to apply, and the interest rate for businesses can be as low as 4%. And it's the same process where they put the application in, and then if they have physical damage, they're assigned to a loss verifier who makes a determination how much damage they've had, physical damage, and then they're assigned to a loan officer who determines how much of a repayment the business has, how much repayment ability they would be able to pay back, and then they determine based on the amount of the loan and the amount of the repayment, monthly repayment, how long of a term. They can take it out again as long as 30 years. Also, though, there's one unique feature about the business loans, which is that the U.S. Small Business Administration offers what they call economic injury disaster loans. And economic injury is for working capital to help keep a business in business through the recovery period. It's to help pay your monthly expenses, your rent, your utilities, your payroll, your taxes, those things that you have to pay on a regular basis. But maybe you're not doing as much business right now because of the disaster. Maybe some contracts you had or people that you used to do business with aren't around anymore, so business is on a lull. So that's exactly what the economic injury disaster loan is for. Now, a lot of times people like to think that it's to replace their lost profit. They say, well, my power was out for 2 weeks, so nobody came in, so does that for my lost profit? And it's not. It's really working capital to keep you going.
So, for instance, let's play that example out. So, say somebody was out for 7 days. They couldn't bring in the revenue to pay their workers and keep open, and they had orders to fulfill. Would they be eligible or not?
Absolutely.
Oh, they
But-
would be eligible.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it's not to bring in the lost, it's not to replace the lost revenue.
It's the working capital to keep the business.
That's right, it's to pay those employees and to
I had an
pay the
interesting
bills.
phone call during that period of time. We had a company, I think they make uniforms for the Department of Defense. And they were really struggling because they had deadlines to meet while the power was out.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, man, do you have any idea when the power was out? And we were calling PSC&G, and but they were really in pins and needles because they had a deadline to get these uniforms out. And they didn't know if they were going to be able to make that deadline or not.
Right.
Yeah. Also, we have unemployment, disaster unemployment is still running for people that lost wages.
Right, those were some of the
So-
other benefits. Now, is that a FEMA initiative or is that a state initiative?
Well, it's FEMA funded.
Okay, so it comes through the state
The state,
unemployment
yeah.
office and.
It goes
okay.
in FEMA funded, and still, it's gonna be till February 3rd.
Okay.
So there's still time to apply for unemployment. That's from the time of disaster until you lost wages, wherever you lost until you got back.
Okay.
Okay, due to the disaster. So we encourage that program to still effect.
Great.
Take
Now,
advantage.
still, go to the DRC for that?
No, you go to your local unemployment
Unemployment
office.
office.
You go to local unemployment
Unemployment
office.
Yeah, so
directly
if you
for that.
lost wages as a result of the storm, say your job closed down because they just couldn't ramp up and they didn't re-ramp up, so.
Some businesses actually paid their employees that
Right.
time, which is good, you know. Some people out there really were hard.
There's still a number of resources that are available outside of the FEMA SBA because the taxing with the Department of Taxation, with your filing for your annual taxes, and you can have adjustments made
Correct.
in relationship to what was going on. So number of people who have businesses or even want to look at it from a personal involvement would have an opportunity to talk to your tax preparer about how this circumstance
Right,
also
and also we have
affected
a vast variety of state agencies. We have HUD, Housing Urban Development is there. We have social services. We have legal counseling.
you. Right.
And we have legal aid. We have lawyers there for legal aid. There was one gentleman that came to a DRC, he was a truck driver. This case was kind of really weird, but he absorbed every possible agency that was at that DRC within a week. He came to ask about wages, he asked about insurance about his truck, he came to SBA, he came to FEMA. He went and asked, and he was a Hispanic person. You could tell he had a little speech impairment, but we helped him. But he took advantage of every single agency. His just the legal part. They sat with him. They called his insurance company. They were able to settle with him on the phone because he just couldn't understand. His truck was gone, lost. What was the settlement? And he was able to get affidavits notarized
Exactly, right.
took advantage of
A
that. He
number of
probably
different
saved over
services.
$500 worth of legal fees right there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so satisfied that he was able to take advantage of all those programs. He applied for unemployment. They helped him there to fill it out. They called the unemployment. They emailed a form. He filled it out with all the information they needed. It was sent out. He did the SBA right there. We don't know what the termination. I think he was referred back to FEMA. And FEMA, well, he didn't have any property damage. His truck is what he was reclaiming, but at least he tried to do something. But he did exactly everything that anybody could possibly do to get assistance. And he was very happy with the whole process. Everybody was very nice to him. And he took advantage of every single process.
You know, for the local, right, Chief, I was wanting to get an idea exactly how does the first responders really play into helping people who may need information, or what kind of relationship that you would have in assisting people in the case of the emergency?
Well, a lot of it goes into the pre-planning and setting up the shelters and that type of stuff, trying to get that information out through stations like yourself or through reverse 911. You know, you have to wait till the disaster happens to see what you're gonna have to do, but, you know, this time we were out on the street, actually with FEMA, doing surveys and getting them to the people that we thought needed the assistance, which were the trees into the houses and the power lines down. And, you know, we worked with FEMA there. We also got involved with public service and the public utilities, you know, on the ground trying to get the situation handled, because they couldn't get the trees off the houses, so we had the power lines restored or make sure they were dead. Because you have to assume that every line that's down, even though you think it may be dead, you have to assume that it's alive.
It's alive,
So
yeah.
we couldn't let the tree people take the trees off the power lines until it was confirmed. That was one of our major problems in the beginning of the storm.
Yeah, Herb, I know one of the things that, and in fact, another one of my staff members were involved in, there was a group, I guess, United Chaplains, who were on the ground. And it's amazing what happens in the course of a disaster. So people's spiritual needs, whatever your faith tradition is, you know, so they were out there on the ground trying to minister to people. But we did some things where they fed people. We had, even in one of our public housing complexes where we knew people were struggling to get food, we went over and we did a feeding. And people appreciated it because it provided them some financial relief, and the chaplains went out and raised the resources to get that done. So we want to thank them. One of the other things that people should know, because in preparation for a disaster, not only this one that we're in the aftermath, but moving forward, special needs populations, there's a way that you can register so that we know where you are, so that we can get to you. It was amazing. I was out delivering water. People had, you know, needs for just basic things like water. So, you know, those are some of the things that we do in advance, so that special needs population. One of the other things, though, we want to encourage residents, if it ever happens again, when we set up the shelters, we want to thank Pastor Watson publicly, because our government shelter lost power. He had set up a shelter in our rec center, the Gatling Center, and that lost power. Then we had to shift gears. We were transporting people up to the county. Then they had some problems. They had to close theirs down. So Pastor Watson, we ended up finding out what a valuable resource First Congregational is, and they're still part of the recovery, because they're giving out food, blankets, and clothes. Right now, Reverend Ron Christian has a trailer through Feed the Children, so it's dealing with some of these economic losses that are not recoverable by certain areas. We still have a number of our faith-based institutions in town trying to fill that gap. So they have a big trailer over on Lyons Avenue over the next few days, helping people with clothes and food in front of Christian Love.
Now, did you have the volunteers from the emergency management, were they really pretty active?
Well, we didn't have a core group of volunteers. Some people stepped up to help, but really what really for us, our municipal staff stepped in a big way and did a lot of stuff.
What it did do was, now we're being very
groups like
proactive.
Herb's, the United Chaplains were great. They stepped in.
We have looked at how what's happening in today's government is that it's shrinking, and a lot of times they don't have the capacity to fulfill every need. So volunteers are very important, and through FEMA, there have been a number of different activities that are going on through the NEMA, the National Institute for management assistance.
Right.
And that relationship is what we at We Care Partners have gotten involved with. We're working with the first responders through their activity of building an Office of Emergency Management with
But
the
do you have
mayor.
CERT teams here?
So that's exactly
We used
what
to-
I'm
yeah,
going
we used
to.
to have a CERT team.
We're
It's not as
looking-
active as it
We're looking at developing those kinds of opportunities to do the outreach, to build the CERT teams, and to also encounter ways in which we can have a volunteer activity of educating people about preparedness. So this mission has really opened up a large area of concern, and the mayor and the fire chief has been very supportive in the effort of coming up with strategies that we would be able to use those resources that FEMA also offers.
Yeah, we have which I've worked on, it's a program that we do education for schools, and I think Louise worked with us when she was at the Red Cross.
Yeah.
It's called FEMA for Kids. It's a project that we go to the schools with the fire department, the police department, educate about preparedness and awareness. In times of disaster like this, children tend to be vulnerable. They don't understand why these things happen. And through these programs of education and preparedness awareness with the Red Cross, when she was there, and actually with the SBA, we were able to go to different schools, just speak to children about it. I remember one little kid, I always remember the day, that was about 2 years ago in Buffalo, right? Little kid raised his hand and said, I don't know why we had to all be prepared. The world's going to end in 2012.
There you go.
Think today.
Which is today.
So, no, so he was familiar with the Mayan calendar.
Right? I don't know why all this preparedness. The world's going to end anyway.
Well, kids are a great way to go because they take the message home to their
Exactly.
families.
Well, and they bug the parents. We got water, do we have a generator, do we got
They worry.
batteries?
You know, a great website is at ready.gov.
Ready.gov is
They
excellent
have,
website.
you know, several different scenarios for winter storms, for hurricanes, for flooding, what to do, what to have prepared. And I suggest to everybody that has a computer to go there, download the information. You know, it tells you about, you know, having your paperwork prepared in a safe place, duplicate copies, because those are things you're gonna need, you know,
And you know
if
what-
there should be a disaster.
You know, on a neighborhood level, you know, we're encouraging, and we're big on block associations, but they become critical in a disaster process because everybody on the block, though, you know, we live in a different world. When I grew up, we used to speak to everybody on the block. You barely know your neighbors sometimes, but there are always seniors on the block. And we got to make it a mission to know those
Exactly.
people on the block who need special help when these things come. So block associations become critical at dealing with this. Can we share food? People on my block were trying to share generators. You know, that kind of thing comes out of some of this. And so it's better to get ahead of it and plan for those kinds of things on a neighborhood level to see what kind of things. You know, the other interesting thing for us in the whole, as we try to wrap up, and I'm going to get some comments from all of you before we wrap up, was one of the interesting things that I saw is in our power grid, and you know, one of the priorities is they keep the government up and running. And so a lot of our business community, because they are on that same grid, so on Springfield Avenue, everybody was coming from everywhere to eat and spend money in Irvington. So in many spaces, businesses had suffered, but in other places, they actually got a rush of support because the suburban communities, they had nowhere else to go to come and eat. They were eating, all our restaurants were full. It was like, I had to go out and eat every night. So I got a chance to see all that. Every little place was full up. It was like amazing. So from Springfield Avenue, from Grove to the Maplewood line, the lights were on. So I ventured off into Maplewood, and there was nothing. You know, people were, so everybody was coming our way to support. So,
That means you had gas.
huh?
You guys had gas.
Well, you know, in this power grid, because of the fire and police department, a major portion of our business
Well, lights
community
were
was
also
open.
on.
was
Yeah,
was
Springfield
open.
Avenue
We had
was wide
power.
open.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, so
you
our
had
a major business corridor had power, so that forced a lot of people to come in town to eat, to shop, and so forth and so on. So, you know, we had some struggles in the neighborhoods, but in the major commercial district, because we're on the same grid, you know, the fire and police department, they were able to stay powered up. And actually, it was funny, the letter that I shared with you earlier before we were on camera showed that even some of the businesses were giving out food to those families who just were not able to do it. So Herb, we look forward to working with We Care as we develop these processes to inform people better. Can you give us a parting comment?
Well, Mayor, we're very happy about your spontaneous attitude and wanting to bring together a forum such as this to reach our community and continue to make them aware of how important communication is and to really try to channel the right information and the right method. We're happy that you're supportive, especially to the effort of reaching out to the community and developing ways in which we can get more community activity involved with helping government involved with the emergency process, and we're certainly going to be supportive to that.
And Chief Shumlick, in your role as one of my deputy emergency management coordinators, I know we're trying to document every dime that we spent so that we can get the maximum reimbursement from FEMA. How is that process going?
Process is going as well as can be. I mean, FEMA has actually stepped up and
They're offering us help.
offering us help in the reimbursement part as far as salaries.
Sure.
They're proactive in the.
Yeah, they were in early, like the second or third day.
They were here right away,
Yeah.
making sure everything was taken care of. But as a emergency management, we learned a lot from this. We were prepared. Could we do a better job? Yes.
No,
we know the
absolutely. Improve every
we
time.
know
While
some of those
weaknesses, I think,
deficiencies,
yeah, mhm.
and we're going to try and work on those and get to a better deployment for
And
ourselves.
Alberto, any parting comments? I would like you to tell us, so since we have an extra month, what the website is and the phone
Yes.
number.
Yeah, it's, like I said, our number is 1-800-621-3362 at www.disasterassistance.gov. The first part of the recovery is to register with FEMA. And basically, that's what everything starts. If you were impacted by any way, if it's a disaster, just register, let the experts help you. There's always help on the way. Don't hesitate, don't disqualify yourself. Homeowners with insurance also are encouraged to register with FEMA. Our deadline's been extended to January 30th of the 2013. There's still help there available. And if you have any questions, the Recovery Center will be open until the end of the month. And once that leaves, any Recovery Center within the state of New Jersey, I guess the nearest one here is going to be Jersey City, be the next one. But you can always call at 1-800-621-3362. As of close of business yesterday, we had over 248,000 applications with FEMA for a total of $313 million approved for the entire state.
And the
Yeah,
weeks.
I'm going to reference a number two. I'm going to go ahead and say it right away. It's the U.S. Small Business Administration Customer Service Center number is 1-800-659-2955. Again, that's 1-800-659-2955. And the reason I bring that up is because if people have the application and they need some help, help is available. They don't have to feel like they have to do it on their own. They can call that customer service center number. They can call that number. They can find their closest recovery center and they can go there. There's a way to do it online. If they want to go to www.sba.gov, and if they're in the privacy of their homes and they're doing it online and they get stuck, they can call that 1-800 number and they can help them out with that. But we really encourage people to get those applications in because you don't. A lot of times people are trying to make a decision whether or not they want the loan or not, but they don't have it yet. So they need to get the application in so they have a decision, so they know what the decision is that they're making. So that's really the encouragement.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming, and I wish everyone a happy holidays, including our viewing audience. And remember, as we're preparing through the holiday season and this time of enjoyment and merriment and gift giving and thinking of those things like how do we prepare for the new year, remember we're still in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, so do the best that you can to make yourself whole as you go into the new year. We have about 9 days for the Recovery Center at Willing Heart, 555 Martin Luther King Boulevard. Some of you know it as High Street in Newark, New Jersey, right across the street from Arch High School is the place you can go and you'll get a live person to help answer your questions, navigate you through the process. Don't give up because you got a denial letter. Keep pressing on. Have a blessed holiday and a great new year. This has been Mayor Wayne Smith, and this is Inside Irvington.